They called him a toy soldier, just a tomb guard in a fancy uniform, standing stiff in the National Mall's spring sunlight. The NATO soldiers smirked, their laughter sharp, slicing through the Memorial Day crowd. "Look at that guy," one scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Probably never held a real rifle." But under the tomb guard's collar, a silver gray patch glinted, unnoticed by the mockers, unseen by the tourists snapping photos. What they didn't know, what they couldn't imagine, was that the man they ridiculed had once walked through hell in a Syrian desert, carrying his dying team through gunfire. And the only person who knew the truth, a French general with a chest full of medals, was already crossing the mall, her eyes locked on that patch, ready to silence the laughter with a story no one was prepared to hear. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe that values like honor, courage, and sacrifice still matter, join us in keeping their legacy alive. The National Mall stretched out under a clear May sky, the kind of spring day in Washington, D.C. that made the monuments gleam like they were carved yesterday. It was Memorial Day, 2025, and the air carried the weight of ceremony. Flags snapping in the breeze, the faint hum of a distant crowd, and the sharp cadence of military boots on pavement. Near the Lincoln Memorial, a formation of soldiers stood in perfect alignment, their uniforms a patchwork of nations, the dark greens and blues of NATO allies from France, Germany, and the Netherlands, alongside the crisp navy blue of a single American tomb guard. The crowd, families, veterans, tourists, watched from behind velvet ropes, their phones raised to capture the spectacle of an international ceremony honoring those who'd fallen in Allied operations. Sergeant Nathan Brooks stood third from the left, his tomb guard uniform immaculate, navy blue coat, white gloves, black kepi hat tilted just so. At 35, he was older than most in the formation, his face weathered in a way that spoke of years spent under harsher suns than this one. A faint scar traced his jaw, barely noticeable unless you knew what shrapnel looked like up close. His eyes steady and unblinking, fixed on a point in the distance, as if he could see through the crowd, through the city, to a place no one else could name. Beneath his collar, hidden from view, a small silver gray patch pressed against his skin, a relic from a life most here would never understand. The ceremony was meant to be a show of unity, a nod to NATO's shared sacrifices, but not everyone saw it that way. Captain Lucas Schmidt, a German officer with a lean frame and a smirk that seemed stitched to his face, stood a few rows back with his unit. His blonde hair caught the sunlight as he leaned toward a Dutch soldier, his voice carrying just far enough to be heard. "Look at that guy," he said, nodding toward Nathan, the American in the fancy costume. "What do they call them? Tomb guards? More like parade dolls. I bet he's never fired a shot in his life." A few of his men chuckled, their laughter sharp and careless, like kids tossing stones into a pond without checking what was beneath the surface. Nathan didn't flinch. He couldn't, not in this formation where every movement was choreographed to perfection. But the words landed, heavy as they were, and something in his breathing shifted. A slight hitch, controlled, like a man who'd learned to stay calm when the world was screaming. The Dutch soldier, a young private with a nervous glance, muttered, "Maybe keep it down, Captain. People are watching." Schmidt waved him off. "Relax, Peter. It's not like they can hear us. Besides, this is all for show. Back home, we're running live fire drills while these guys play dress up for tourists." A French sergeant, older than the rest, with a face that looked like it had seen actual service, shifted uncomfortably. He whispered something to his comrade in rapid French, his eyes flicking toward Nathan. The comrade, a woman with lieutenant spars, nodded but said nothing, her expression tight. Schmidt, though, was just warming up. He'd noticed something, a glint of silver gray fabric peeking from under Nathan's collar, not part of the regulation uniform. His grin widened. "Check that out," he said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to turn their heads. "What's that under his collar? Some kind of good luck charm? Maybe his mom sewed it on to keep him safe while he marches in circles." The crowd stirred, some tourists smiling uncertainly, others frowning at the loud German officer. A few snapped photos, their cameras clicking like cicadas. Nathan's face remained stone, but his fingers, hidden by his gloves, tightened slightly around the ceremonial rifle. The French sergeant muttered again, this time loud enough for Schmidt to hear. "That patch? I've seen it before, in a briefing maybe. It's not just decoration." Schmidt laughed, stepping closer to the rope barrier separating the formation from the crowd. A briefing? Come on, Marcel. It's probably something he picked up at a gift shop. These guys are actors, not soldiers. Real soldiers are out there running ops, making decisions that actually matter. The words cut through the air, sharp and deliberate, and the crowd's murmur grew. A family nearby, a mother with two kids clutching tiny American flags, looked confused, their smiles fading. An older man, his Vietnam veteran cap tilted low, narrowed his eyes at Schmidt, but said nothing. The other soldiers in the formation held their positions, but there was a subtle shift in their posture, a tension that rippled through the line like a held breath. Nathan's eyes stayed fixed, but the scar on his jaw seemed to catch the light differently now, as if it carried its own story, waiting to be told. That's when someone else moved. General Claire Dubois, a French officer with a reputation for steel nerves and sharper insight, stood at the edge of the VIP section, her dark eyes locked on Nathan. At 53, she carried herself with a kind of authority that didn't need shouting. Her uniform was simple, the medals pinned to her chest glinting faintly in the sunlight. She'd been watching the ceremony, her mind half on the speeches about to begin, when Schmidt's voice pulled her attention. Then she saw it, the silver-gray patch under Nathan's collar, barely visible but unmistakable. Her breath caught. She'd seen that patch before in classified reports buried so deep most generals didn't know they existed. Dubois moved toward the formation, her steps measured but deliberate, like a storm rolling in slow. The crowd parted without being asked, sensing the shift in the air. Schmidt was still talking, his voice a mix of bravado and mockery. "Hey, Tomb Guard," he called, loud enough for the whole mall to hear. "What's that patch supposed to be? Part of the costume, or did he borrow it from a war movie?" His men laughed again, though the French sergeant looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. The Dutch private shifted his weight, looking at the ground. Dubois reached the rope barrier and stopped. She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. When she spoke, the words carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many battlefields to tolerate fools. "Sergeant," she said, her accent crisp but clear, "where did you come by that patch?" The question hung in the air, simple but heavy, like a stone dropped into still water. The crowd went quiet, the tourists' cameras lowering, the chatter dying mid-sentence. Even the flag seemed to pause in the breeze. Nathan didn't turn his head, couldn't break formation, but the rules allowed a response to a direct question from a superior. His voice came out steady, low, like he was reading coordinates in a war room. Delta 7, Alan Asif, Syria, 2015. The words hit Dubois like a physical blow. She'd read the reports on Delta 7, a unit that didn't exist on any public record, a name whispered only in secure briefings. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment she looked past Nathan, as if she could see the desert sands and the smoke of that long-ago night. Schmidt's smirk faltered, but he tried to hold on to it. Delta 7 sounds like a video game. What's that supposed to mean? He turned to his men, expecting laughter, but none came. The French sergeant was staring at Nathan now, his eyes wide with recognition. The Dutch private shifted his weight, looking at the ground. Dubois stepped closer to the rope barrier, her voice dropping but still carrying across the silent mall. "Captain?"